Welcome to MGSN. Earlier this year, Sam Bankman-Fried was a leader in the cryptocurrency industry, sitting atop a $32 billion empire. His cryptocurrency exchange, FTX, was one of the largest in the world and considered a highly reputable leader and founder and CEO. And at one point had an estimated $26.5 billion in personal wealth. Today, that's all gone. I have attorney Jerry Keogh and attorney Gerard McCabe, our legal experts, to talk about the current state of affairs of cryptocurrency. How are you doing, everyone? How are you today?
Good. Thanks, Mac. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's start with you, Gerard. I want to get your take on this case of FTX and the current state of affairs of cryptocurrency.
Well, I'm a fan of regulation. That's why I'm on the show. Mr. Keogh is not. From my vantage point, digital assets have largely been unregulated. Their prices frequently manipulated. Market participants too often defrauded, simply exploited at times, and assets stolen outright. So taxes that are owed aren't paid. So I believe that that regulation in general is a good thing. As it relates to the FTX has made it quite simple, a lot easier for me to argue there should be some form of regulation. That's a company that's embezzling millions and millions of money, basically destroyed the company. And who wouldn't want that not to happen in another company in the digital asset world, right? So it's quite easy. FTX, from my vantage point, I don't want to take advantage of it too much. I think it's such an extreme. Clearly, that the owner of that company or the CEO of that company needs to be held accountable for his actions, and anyone else that participated in the embezzling, the wire fraud, whatever else went on. Let the investigation go on, innocent until proven guilty, but it's pretty clear based on what's transpired to date that the problems with the FTX needs to be addressed.
Yeah, Bankman-Fried, also known as SBF, is under multiple federal charges, including conspiracy to commit wire fraud, campaign finance violations, and has over $8 billion of FTX customer deposits that are allegedly missing. So, Jerry Keogh, what's your response? Do you think that there should be, regulation?
No, the SDNY has been investigating wire fraud and mail fraud on regulated industries. As a matter of fact, most of the crimes that have been perpetrated in the financial sector are regulated industries like the banks. Most of the prosecutions that the SDNY implements are against regulated industries. There's plenty of laws in place to protect the fraud that may or may not have been perpetrated by FTX. I don't think FTX is an example. I agree with Gerard. You will have Congress, women and men made against bad people or bad actors. And then you're stuck with the law, like RICO. RICO was designed to get rid of the mob. And once the mob was over, well, you think the prosecutors were going to let that golden goose go fly away? They started using RICO against anybody, including people who are engaged in protected rights of protest. So at the end of the day, regulation only allows the law enforcement community to gain more work, more jobs, and at the expense of innovation.
So the expense of innovation doesn't outweigh the cost to companies that deal with digital assets. Just the last 2.5 years, it's documented that over $1 billion have been hacked from these companies. Forget about the criminals and forget about tax evasion and all the other issues that I think are relevant. But clearly, there needs to be some form of regulation so that the bad actors on these platforms can be held accountable for their actions. It can't be like the Wild West. There needs to be some form of regulation.
How did the regulation stop the
innovation? Will happen anyway.
How did the regulation stop the billions and billions of dollars that have been hacked out of regulated entities like financial institutions and banks? It doesn't do the trick.
We're too experienced to know things. They don't stop. There's always an element that you're not going to be able to stop. But it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some form of regulation to try to limit the losses that are incurred by thievery and hackers and such. I just don't see how no regulation, especially in the current environment. FTX certainly makes an easy argument for me because it's such a blatant example of thievery. But there are a lot of.
Do you think that the SEC has no place at all in cryptocurrency across the board?
Well, SEC or regulators in general?
regulators in general, but specifically the SEC, I mean, just recently is painting a picture of a 3-year scheme in which, Bankman-Fried took billions from customers for personal use, luxury real estate and political donations, and it fell apart when the cryptocurrency market plummeted earlier this year. So really what I'm saying is, from Gerard's perspective, yes, the SEC or any regulatory, funnel makes sense. But, Jerry, are you literally saying that nowhere in the cryptocurrency landscape is any regulatory, thing, appropriate?
No, that would be insane. I think regulation is really key. The real point is, though, there should be self-regulatory ethical policies that are driven by legal requirements, legal constrictions, and that the consumer can press a button and say, I want to see your ethical policy. I want to see what your KYC programs are. KYC is out of the Sarbanes era. It's know your customer, know your client. I want to see where that money's coming from. It's if you can't disclose to me, if you got 3 billion on your blockchain, you have no clue where that came from, then I'm not going to invest in this particular offering because it's not being regulated well. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really hard to feel sorry for the quote unquote victims of FTX, because they had, a lot of these were very wealthy funds, very wealthy individual owners like Tom Brady, and they have all the lawyers and that they have at their disposal to do due diligence. They failed to do due diligence themselves. So now all of a sudden there's a big cry and it's a big concern. Oh, we're going to have a lot of regulation here because the really rich guys failed to do their due diligence. But the whole innovation shouldn't suffer because
your argument collapses on itself. You're saying it should be self-regulation. Why didn't FTX self-regulate? It just doesn't work. They were left to their own demise. Look what they did. And so somebody who invests in them doesn't know that this guy's going on vacations all over the world, buying homes for employees, $1 million homes, just like a drunken sailor throwing money around. How are they supposed to know that's happening? Because
I'll be honest with you, a very
regulation doesn't work.
I would hire a good lawyer like you who would then turn around and say, I'm going to put an investment into this company. I'd like you to do some due diligence. And you know yourself, the minute you started getting the hemming and haws, when you started putting on those due diligence requests and those DDI requests, and you say to me, Jerry, they're not getting back to me. And I say, you know what? Tell them arrivederci Roma, we're gone. Tom Brady didn't want to do that.
Not a blockchain out there where you have to identify yourself. It's complete anonymity. And so where's the self-regulation there?
Well, the self-regulation would say that ends it, just as I said before. It's over and done with. I would use that as my marketing tool. I'm a better blockchain. You can go into the blockchain and find out where every dollar that comes in and where it comes out and who it's from. And it's KYC. And if you get a good lawyer like McCabe, he's going to look into it. That's
not an expensive endeavor. Come on, Jerry.
That's an expensive endeavor, but it's nowhere near the expense you would have on regulation. Because in regulation, every time you turn around, you're going to have 3,000 lawyers look over everything you do.
Well, you want the lawyers to go check out the blockchain to try to determine who.
One guy. I'll take one lawyer who has your skill set. And say, hire McCabe. If you want to look, if you're going to go into the crypto, hire McCabe, because I know he's going to do a good job on the DDI.
This doesn't work that way in the real world. It certainly sounds nice and fancy, self-regulation. It doesn't work.
Works for lawyers. We're self-regulated.
Oh, no, that's a bad example because most people don't like lawyers on a good day.
They don't like lawyers because they're doing their jobs. Their job's not to make people happy. Their jobs are to question cops, question politicians, question transactions. Well, you and I both in the business world, what do they call us? Deal killers, because we're making questions. We're asking, where's that money coming from? And what is my responsibility?
Yeah, because we're good, honest lawyers, and not everyone out there is a good, honest lawyer. Regulation would provide certainty and assist all parties in making very informed decisions across the board. It will level the playing field. And there's a lot more reasons to regulate than when we're talking about the obvious FTX example. That's easy. That's black and white. There's at least 4 different reasons why I think we should regulate. Mac, if you want to ask me another question or how you want to go forward, you let me know.
Gerard, I mean, I'm very interested in what your take is on just in general, cryptocurrency and the positive aspects of, regulatory, because I mean, what I'm understanding from what you're saying is that it will reduce the risk. And right now, cryptocurrency is one of the most volatile spaces to be doing any financial activity. So What's the positive aspect of regulation within cryptocurrency?
It's more than just risk. The first one, for example, greening the blockchain. Everyone that knows anything about digital assets knows that blockchain mining uses an amazing amount of electricity, and it's all fossil fuels. If you regulate that and you force the miners to use renewable sources of energy to do their mining, that will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in globally, and that's only going to get more significant as digital assets become more commonplace. The second and very important reason is that if you regulate, you can increase the opportunity for clearing digital assets through a central depository. Right now, you gotta go through the blockchain of a particular digital asset platform. It's very time consuming. If you do a central depository, like for example, the Depository Trust Company, they're already a third-party trust company that does this. If you regulate that and force everybody to go through a depository, then what you're doing is you're level the playing field. You're making it much more efficient. You have economies of scale that only help all the investors in this space. Mr. Keel, I don't know if you want to respond to that or you want me to keep going.
I'd like to respond to it.
Yeah, please.
So first up on the greening aspect, if you want to regulate all industries, and remember, they're the ones who are jumping up and down as saying you can't force us to go into non-fossil fuels. I think the goal is admirable, but I also think that if I'm a cryptocurrency offering and I want to get young investors in here, I'm going to make sure my ESG policy deals with, okay, we are only mining with renewable energy, or we're
back to self-regulation, Mr. Keel.
Back to self-regulation, because self-regulation works when it's done right. Because you know what, vast majority of ESG policies is self-regulation. There is no regulation that we need to have fossil fuels.
That's why it hasn't been implemented enough in the corporate world in general. We don't see enough ESG because it's self-regulatory.
Right. Well, at the end of the day, the real question comes down to, it's a great point you raised, because the real question comes down to is there has to be a legal basis to support the regulation. So now let's look at some of the issues that you raised in your 4 points that are on there. What is the entity? Now, right now, there's a case that's going before the circuit where it's in the summary judgment stage, meaning that the both parties have completed their discovery and they believe there's no genuine issue in dispute. And it's a prime example of what's wrong with an overregulated society. The SEC has, in a massive overreach, decided to declare jurisdiction without any sort of legislative input over crypto by stating that it was a equity. And the case is now in summary judgment. I've read the brief, and Gerard and I have talked about this case off air on a number of occasions. And that's a worthy discussion. Like, where's going to be the basis of enforcement? You're going to say, okay, everybody's like, let's regulate this. Great. Who's going to do it, and what's the legal basis for it? Other than I just don't understand it and I don't like it, and I want more cops on the corner. Because that's not been doing this country very well. We got the largest prison population in the world, and our crime rates are higher than countries that have lower prison rates. So at the end of the day, just putting a cop on every corner is not always the answer. The real question is, let's start with the question of, if we're going to go regulation, as Gerard is proposing, what is the regulatory agency? Do you believe that this is an equity that should be regulated, Gerard?
Well, the case that you're referring to is called Ripple, and the SEC has sued Ripple to try to impose its will on Ripple, to say that Ripple is dealing in securities and not anything else. Right now, Ripple's position is there are not securities that we sell and that we manage, and that therefore the SEC has no jurisdiction. So the court's going to decide whether or not a digital asset is a security or not. I read the briefs on both sides, very compelling. I love the lead counsel in Ripple. He's a very successful attorney, has represented many, many very, very well-to-do companies. He's also a former fireman like myself and put himself through law school, did it the old-fashioned way. So I have a little bit of I lean to him a little bit as someone that's kind of been there where I've been. But the SEC has an argument to make. I don't think it's a good one. I think that what we should do is put Ripple aside for the moment and say, okay, I don't believe the SEC has met its burden. in federal court. So let's assume that for a moment, and that they find that a digital asset is not a security. So what do? I still believe it has to be regulated. Now, certainly next year, I guarantee you, Congress will come up with some kind of law that will create an agency if they have to. They have no problem doing that. But they could also take a look at the Commodities Future Trading Commission. Why? Because I believe that a digital asset is derivative in its nature and falls more comfortably under that umbrella and under that jurisdiction. And they should be the ones that should take a shot at perhaps regulating digital assets. Whether or not that will happen, I'm not sure how Congress is going to address this. I do agree with Mr. Keogh that Congress is going to jump all over this because of the XTC issue. And they are going to want to seem like they're the heroes who are protecting the little guy, although there are very few little guys who are investing in digital assets right now. So that's my opinion. Mr. Keogh?
I think you raise an issue that if you are not in favor of regulation, you're going to have to think twice about the issue of commodity. Is it derivative in nature? There's certainly a component of it being derivative, and there's a legal there's a legal analysis on derivatives and how they define that's on there. And I think a good lawyer could make the argument that this is derivative value, and as a derivative value, then the commission could regulate. The real question is, should it? Because remember, when you have regulatory authority, you do not always have to execute it if you're looking to nurture the economy. Let's look, for example, when the internet first came out, there were all sorts of people saying, let's regulate this. It's all sorts of things that are happening on the internet that we just don't understand or don't like. Let's get regulation out there. Now, when online sales came in, and there was a whole issue of local authorities looking to do, how are we going to get our sales tax? We want our VIG out of this. And they said, well, don't you see you're nurturing a whole brand new platform, because we're not going to stick our regulatory nose into this just yet in order to nurture this. I think there is a role for a decentralized currency that can be deployed within a peer-to-peer operation that allows young entrepreneurs to come in there and receive funding for their in a peer-to-peer compound, and which utilizes you could utilize a batch. It could be a stable coin. It could be a crypto coin. It could be a meme coin, and it could also be a coin that's predicated on barters, like the Sardex.
For example, such a small sample pooling. I mean, when you look at digital assets and you look at who's invested in it, what you're offering up is a very small, example of investors that are going to be, that are going to take advantage of this deregulated digital asset platform.
Thank you for that lively debate, Jerry Keogh and Gerard McCabe. That was a great debate on the regulatory aspects of the cryptocurrency space. I'm your host, Mac Hutchinson. This is MGSN, and so long.